Hey, it's Soul with some more patch 9.1 PTR coverage. Today we're going to cover the upcoming PvP gearing changes and why, in so few words, it's pretty good. Let's start by reading the blue post. In Shadowlands, we've been happy to see that the reintroduction of Honor, Conquest, and PvP gear vendors has been well received by players. Nonetheless, we feel that there is still room for improvement. One piece of feedback we've heard repeatedly is that PvP gear needs something special for it to stand apart in PvP-specific situations. In an upcoming build of the Chains of Domination PTR, you will notice that all Season 2 PvP items have a plus 13 item level in PvP. This means that in PvP situations such as battlegrounds, arenas, and war mode, the power of these items will increase by 13 item levels. Along with this, the baseline item level of these items will be reduced by 6 from where it would otherwise have been. If this arrangement had been in place during Shadowlands Season 1, Duelist gear would have had a baseline item level of 220 and would have scaled up to item level 233 in Season 1 PvP. What we want here is for the different endgame sources of gear to be viable in all content, while the very best gear for PvP generally comes from PvP activities, and the very best gear for raids and dungeons generally comes from raids and dungeons. We believe this small adjustment gets us closer to accomplishing that, while still allowing for plenty of crossover play between PvE and PvP. Now let's re-explain this just a little bit and talk about gearing in Shadowlands Season 1, how it is right now. Without question, the fastest way to gear was to get a high PvP rating to get access to the highest honor upgrades. Then buy the gear that you want with Conquest and then binge farm the honor to upgrade it to its highest level. This gave players at the competitive level a clear advantage over those who didn't have the skill to obtain a high rating or the gold to have someone else carry them to a high rating. Thanks to that whole thing in Castle Nathria where the last two bosses gave higher item level loot, that carried over to PvP as well, enabling lucky players to get a 233 elite weapon far faster than they could from Mythic Castle Nathria. This change to PvP rewards leaves us with far fewer major problems to the way gearing works, and especially the disparity between PvP and dungeons and raids. I'll re-explain how PvP gearing is going to work in Season 2 using Season 1 numbers for the sake of familiarity. Right now, we can buy PvP gear with Conquest at an item level of 200 before ratings or upgrades or any of that stuff. And while we're outdoors, or in war mode, or in an instance, or a raid, or a battleground, or whatever, that item level is still 200. After 9.1, the PvP gear that you can buy with Conquest before rating and upgrades will start at an item level of 194. Again, we're using Season 1 numbers, but it's going to be 194, 6 item level less than before. However, if you enter a battleground or an arena, or if you flip on that war mode switch, your item level will then jump to 207, the equivalent of 1 higher raid difficulty. What Blizzard basically did was take our efforts in PvP and nerf the effectiveness in PvE content by 6 item level, while buffing the effectiveness in PvP content by 7 item level. So it meets in the middle, it nerfs here, it buffs there. It's simple, and I find this to be hella smart. Some of us can think back to Warlords of Draenor days on PvP servers. Sometimes we would encounter someone out in the open field and think, okay, they're an easy target, and we'd engage. But little do we know that the target is fully decked out in PvP gear, so when my judgment hits him, all of a sudden this guy gets into combat and he gets all burly and unstoppable, and I'm just a noodle in plate by comparison. The power disparity is far less here in Shadowlands thanks to War Mode, which will prevent those sorts of awkward situations like, surprise, PvP gear, motherfucker. Anyway, as well as the item level squish, which lessens the divide between having PvP gear activated or not. True to form, this also means that at the peak of gearing, PvP gear is the best PvP gear, with a 7 item level advantage, and at that level of play, it's significant compared to someone who's decked out in Mythic raid gear. Of course, this also means that in PvE content, dungeon and raid gear is always going to be more effective than elite PvP gear, with the exception of, secondaries that are more advantageous to some classes or specs than others. This will definitely affect player behavior, as now rated PvP will not be the optimal path to gear up for raids and dungeons. This could have an adverse effect in the total population of active PvPers, or complaints about participation, and all of a sudden, oh, the game is dying because so few players are playing, and so on and so forth. This may affect the economy of paid carries because that market may no longer be what it was. But this also filters out the players who are also there for, more or less the wrong reasons. The pool won't be so diluted with people who just want the gear and then they leave. Obviously, PvPers who also do dungeons and raids can unfortunately no longer fully rely on their gladiator gear to carry them through, putting them into the market to roll for or to keep gear that they get from dungeons and raids at the Great and the Great Vault. A 6 item level difference is still a 6 item level difference. But is that the end of the world? Does that make PvP gear literally useless in a raid? I'd argue no. At least for now, because in this first build of 9.1, we're only seeing the changes to PvP gearing, which on its own are almost unquestionably good for the long-term health of the game. Even that whole beef that I had the other week with the last 2 bosses having a higher item level, it feels like it's resolved with these PvP changes. But I've got a feeling this is only the beginning. Valor upgrades, it's currently a thing, and I'm pretty confident that we're going to see more than a few tweaks to the system when it comes to how Valor is earned, milestones to upgrade gear, and more. In the interest of fairness, I would like to see a way to get Mythic Sylvanas levels of gear from the Great Vault for Mythic Keystone people. At this point, I think that this can work. Raids might be where we see a bigger revamp. Okay, we hope to see a bigger revamp. Data mining from WoW had revealed bonus rolls from drops, aka tokens of disappointment. I continue to expect gear from Sanctum of Domination to have bonuses or effects that have an increased potency when inside the raid. That would definitely make raid gear the best gear for raids. But then we have to ask, what makes Mythic Plus gear the best gear for Mythic Plus? Or maybe should we walk that back and assert that the big divide between gearing should only be between PvE and PvP, and not PvP and dungeons and raids? That's a tough one, especially because of the pretty awesome pieces of gear that hunters can get from Sylvanas, but this might only prove to be just one of the examples of cool effects that work great in raid, but just okay anywhere else. At any rate, this little thing is on the PvP side of things, and I would love to hear your thoughts, or rant, or praise over the upcoming change. Is the item level difference too much? Will this liberate you from having to PvP binge in early Season 2? Are you waiting to see what else is in store, or are you just YouTube spam? Thanks for taking a few minutes out of your day to hear my own thoughts. Like the video as a kind of a favor. Subscribe to the channel for more 9.1 coverage, and I'll see you next time. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.